2010. That broke in 2010. So it's a joke to have the police out who will pull over a teenager and take him to jail for drugs, but then they're there pushing it on them. Last time you were on, I ended up playing a clip later of Geraldo Rivera admitting the troops grow the opium, then it's shipped here, but if you're caught with it, you go to jail. Meanwhile, the doctors are pushing, synthetic opiates on the public. Rush Limbaugh's been addicted to them. It's a joke. You don't treat drug addiction by putting people in prison, and all that does is train them to be criminals.
Yes.
You make drugs illegal, now they cost 100 times or more. People rob you. That's just a tax to the banks. You kill this whole drug system by decriminalizing. And I know I'm ranting, but this just shows what a fraud it is, and it shows how deceptive they are. It's one thing to have college students volunteer or police volunteer to be part of a drug program to take drugs so they can recognize it if drugs are still going to be illegal. But it's another thing entirely to use it as a way to basically, and what you said a few weeks ago has now come out, I noticed, they were giving them drugs and money to get them to be informants, to go set up and make stuff up about Occupy Wall Street, just like they did at the RNC 4 years ago, where they set people up.
Yes, and I think that it's also prompted a broader discussion across the whole movement about a wide variety of shady and similar incidents that happen in many, many cities. So I think getting that discussion going again is very important. And I want to add, too, that I worked, covering issues at the state legislature for 4 years, and I made it a very special point to go out of my way to talk to legislators behind closed doors about the war on drugs, about how prohibition creates a flow of laundered drug money through the banking system. And while one clever legislator said that making it a cause of action for civil lawsuits against the banks to essentially claw back the equity that they extract from neighborhoods in the way that Wells Fargo does, for example, that would be one possible remedy the state legislature could have to fight this laundered drug money system. I also would add people at the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension told me that they do not have access to the wire transfer system at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. And so that's an example of how at the state level, the flow of laundered drug money is essentially firewalled off from the local officials, and then instead federal grant programs. In Minneapolis, we have something called the Safe Streets Task Force, which is kind of a little similar to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and there's a lot of operations with federal informants that are involved there and that kind of thing, and that's yet another kind of drug program that has no functional oversight. There's yet another program in St. Paul going on right now called Clean Sweep, which is searching lots of people in minority neighborhoods. Certainly the St. Paul police are not going to treat people in the white neighborhoods in the same way. So it's a real step forward to have this program suspended right now and have those expenditures suspended, which is the direction things need to move. But whether or not we can have a decent debate about the actual problems of the war on drugs, that does remain to be seen. I give credit to City Pages for being the local publication, which at least is getting to the serious issues of drug war corruption in our state.
And notice, Dan, how up front they tried to deny this even existed. I mean, when TSA was caught starting to go in the pants of people 3 years ago, they said for a year, we're not doing this till thousands of videos came out. It's a policy to lie to us, like the police and military are an occupying army, and we're some enemy that's just to be lied to. All they're doing is discrediting themselves. And when Pat Robertson comes out and says decriminalize marijuana, you know their war on drugs is really on its last legs. The question is, what are these big banks going to do when they can't tax us by their customers mugging us and stuff to buy their overpriced drugs?
Yeah, I mean, we have to keep driving the debate forward. We have to keep insisting that people like the mayor explain themselves, to take a stand, to explain how does the corruption and drug prohibition work. I can't help but wander around town, and when I talk to somebody, they're just like, yeah, the police just planted drugs in our car after they searched it, and they laughed at us and said, yeah, we're going to plant it. What are you going to do? You have a public defender. So that that type of abuse is just reproduced at one local police department after another. And
by the way, I knew about police stealing drugs in Dallas. That's why I was in high school 5 years. We had to move to Austin, and my dad sold his dental practices just because the police were, through lawyers and people, threatening to kill me and taking me to jail for stuff and saying, we're going to plant drugs on you. And then later, the sheriff, McWhorter, got busted in Rockwall. You can look it up right after I moved. by the feds flying drugs in. So that's on record that happened. This is so ubiquitous. Take Dallas, again, where I'm from. A few years ago, they got caught pulling over nice cars, throwing bags of chalk in it, and the Dallas Police Department would certify it as cocaine and take their car. I mean, this is a criminal enterprise. Alcohol prohibition ended in the 30s. The police have been corrupted. They were addicted to the money. They wanted the high life. They made narcotics and marijuana illegal shortly after and went into business controlling that. And that's all this is. Let's be honest. Government and big corporations control over 90% of it, and they just use it as a way to put people in private prisons working for 25 cents an hour, displacing all our jobs. Good old boys say, make them criminals work in prison. They got hot tubs and cable. No, they don't. They're there learning how to be criminals that they weren't before, nonviolent people, taking our jobs on the outside. It's so elementary. The banks ship the drugs in, then they own the big private prisons and put the drug slaves in the prisons. I mean, that is a masterful profit structure.
Yeah, it is a truly ugly cycle, and obviously it just keeps accelerating. And so what I am hoping is that out of all of this, that, you know, that discussion needs to move forward. And I think that social activists across the spectrum need to start looking at this more seriously. I'm hoping that the Occupy movement can, you know, keep that rolling more seriously. But I would also add, this was pretty cool that a few days ago, labor unions had taken intersections near the U.S. Bank area on Nicollet Mall, which is right up from PV Plaza. And they had taken, you know, one intersection, and then the police had said, move or we're going to arrest you, blah, blah, blah. They're bringing in the paddy wagons, and people started chanting the name of the program, DRE, DRE. They chanted that, and man, those police backed off. I am telling you, the police in Minneapolis, the mayor did not show up for the first time ever. He did not make an appearance at the May Day parade, which is a major event in the kind of, you know, left side of town, down in Powderhorn. He wasn't even willing to walk the parade because they're trying to extort us with a stadium right now, which is, you know, pretty unpopular around the city. And, you know, stadiums are themselves monuments to, you know, chemical dependency and consuming more alcohol, but also with the DRE program. I don't think the mayor wanted to face the angry public over these different issues. So we're seeing that we can, if we push back, we can actually start getting real traction. And so if everyone does this in their own cities, if you start like taping drug corruption, you know, get your cell phones out, you too can, you know, get some mileage going and try to get ugly programs like this shut down.
Well, Dan, all over the country, people are waking up to this, but they're also waking up to al-Qaeda being a Western creation. It's in the major papers that, oh, we are using al-Qaeda to attack Syria, but this is good al-Qaeda. But then I've got to give my rights up because al-Qaeda is hiding under my desk and wants to get me. I mean, people are really waking up that drugs, terrorism, all of this is simply a pretext to take our freedoms.
Yes, and I think you know, the role of private military contractors for, you know, several decades remains to be, you know, formally laid out, even though those of us that have researched it feel the problem's fairly obvious. And of course, Sibel Edmonds, the FBI whistleblower, you know, recently released her new book, Classified Woman. I've followed the Edmonds case for a long time because that involves the drug trafficking networks across Asia. And, you know, we have the NATO summit coming right up. We should probably ask the questions about what is the role of NATO. Sibel Edmonds said that NATO planes have been used to build up Islamic fundamentalist militias around Asia and Europe to essentially perform their logistics, move them through Turkey, and then up into the Caucasus and Balkans type regions. So the role of NATO in particular as an organization, I think, is probably one of the next places we should start looking, as well as obviously the American banking system.
That's right. The al-Qaeda and other groups, whether it's in Albania, you name it, work for the banks. And then the banks use them to menace us so the banks can take our liberties and freedoms. It's a banking dictatorship. It's global banker occupation, and they're not free market. They use crony, insider, monopolistic tactics to shut down the little guy. They are parasites, and they are the enemy. In closing, they're acting so paranoid and lying so much here, out of hand and being caught, that this looks like this is a lot more than just a program to test drugs. Are you getting any other chatter on what else may be going on? Because you see one cockroach when you turn the lights on, there's more.
Yeah, and I think you know, that's one of the major reasons why a lot of people could relate to the video, is because apart from the fact that, you know, a lot of people around town had experienced this in previous years before this year, the war on drugs is a very, you know, it's an enterprise that feels sketchy, you know, when you're on the real texture of it, and that's what everybody could really relate to. So I think that you know, once you start turning up these rocks, more things start spilling out, more things start coming forward, and also too, in terms of this particular program, they're really trying to basically hang this on, you know, one or two rogue officers, classic limited hangout, but they're still not willing to really forthrightly address the fact they were dropping off people intoxicated in public spaces. They're not willing to address the fact they didn't have, you know, adequate medical coverage and ambulance available down at this facility in Richfield where this was going on. So again, there are still multiple levels of this case yet to be explored, but I am hoping that we can force accountability. We can force, you know, people like the mayor and the state government to say, okay, well, we do recognize that, you know, banks do launder a lot of drug money. Like, this is a consequence of prohibition. And they gain a ton of leverage by pretending that that's not the case. And so I am really hoping that we can keep chipping away at this, because more of these things are going to keep on coming out. That's just the nature of the system.
It is. I mean, you scratch a wall anywhere, you're going to find this stuff. And that's why everybody can just pick one little area they want to fight, and it will move mountains. Dan Fite, thanks for spending time with us.
Hey, great to be with you, Alex. I really appreciate the time.
Oh, I appreciate you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, he's confirmed right. We're confirmed right again. The police trucking people to warehouses to give them any drug they want in exchange for basically going and spying on peaceful protesters. Classic. Absolutely classic. Great job to the crew. That's it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. Lord willing, I'll be back on the radio tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central, 12 noon Eastern for the big daytime radio/TV transmission. And then we'll be back tomorrow night. I'll be hosting the Nightly News, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, PrisonPlanet.tv.